Letting go of the past can be hard. How do you forgive yourself for the ways you've hurt other people? For the things you've said out of spite? For the past version of you who wasn't good enough? How can you live with yourself knowing that your past self did something that shameful? Do you think you can ever fully forgive yourself? We are often told that time heals everything, that eventually, pain fades, guilt softens, and the weight we carry becomes lighter. But sometimes that isn't necessarily the case. Logically, you know you should be able to move on. You tell yourself that everyone makes mistakes, that you've grown, that you'd never make those same choices today. And yet, deep down, a quiet voice whispers that you should have known better. You should have chosen different words. You should have been a better version of yourself back when it really mattered. So you lie awake at night replaying the same memories, dissecting every moment, every expression, every sentence, as if one tiny fix could rewrite the ending. Your brain keeps hitting restart, showing you scenes that you desperately want to escape. But maybe if you analyze them enough, something will finally make sense. Maybe the regret will fade. Maybe you'll discover that you weren't the villain after all, and you were just the victim of fate. But that moment never quite comes. The harder you fight the thoughts, the stronger they push back. Every mistake, every regret, every what if, they all spin in circles, trapping you in moments that no longer exist, making the present feel like it's happening somewhere very far away. And you wonder, how can you ever forgive someone that you can't run from? How can you forgive yourself? Many stories throughout anime explore this exact struggle. Characters crushed under the weight of their own guilt, trying to believe that they deserve another chance. So in this video, we're going to dive into these stories, not just to understand them, but to understand us. And by the end of this video, I'll hope to have answered one question. How can we ever truly forgive ourselves for the people that we used to be? There's a particular kind of guilt that doesn't fade with time. It doesn't soften or slip quietly into the background. It lingers. It embeds itself into the body, a constant ache beneath the skin, a reminder of who someone became when they were desperate to prove that they were worth something. For Reiner Braun of Attack on Titan, guilt isn't a moment or a memory. It is a companion, a shadow that follows every step, a weight that never loosens its grip. Reiner's story began not with hatred or ideology, but with a single desire, to be enough. Born into a world that deemed him lesser, he spent his entire childhood trying to force value into his existence. Every word from his mother, every sideways glance from Marleyan eyes, they all carved him with the same truth. Worth is not inherent. It must be earned. So he clung to the only path offered to him, becoming a warrior, becoming the hero that Marley demanded, becoming someone who mattered. But when a dream is built on desperation rather than conviction, it quickly turns into something fragile and dangerous. The most devastating part about Reiner's journey is that he never truly hated the people that he was sent to destroy. And the moment his squad captain Marcel died before his eyes, something inside him twisted into something unrecognizable. Survival isn't noble. It isn't heroic. It doesn't care about moral purity. It forces decisions that no one should ever have to make, especially a child. Reiner's mission didn't continue because he believed in it. It continued because turning back meant admitting that he was replaceable, that Porco should have been the armored all along. This is where the fracture began, because Reiner didn't want to just go back to Marley and die. They would have given the armor to someone else. His heart split in two long before his mind did. One half clung to the identity that he was told to embody, the warrior who must complete the mission at any cost. The other half sought comfort in the people he was ordered to betray, the comrades who fought beside him, who laughed beside him, and trusted him. The more he grew to care about the people inside the walls, the more unbearable his role became. Every day spent inside the walls forced him deeper into contradiction. Every kindness he received became another knife twisting into his conscience. When he fought titans to save his squad mates, when he risked his life to protect them, when he shared meals and victories and grief, the soldier in him flourished, but the warrior suffocated. His split personality wasn't weakness, it was self-defense, a mind shielding itself from the unbearable truth that he was destroying the very people who taught him what genuine humanity looked like. That all those deaths that he caused weren't island devils, they were just normal people, people that didn't deserve to die. Guilt is a corrosive thing. It doesn't simply haunt, it devours. After revealing himself in Season 2, Reiner never again found solid ground. The persona that once protected him began to collapse, and when the world shifted towards a new era, he was dragged along with it, broken, exhausted, and stripped of whatever purpose once held him together. Post-timeskip Reiner is the aftermath personified. Every ounce of confidence dissolved into trembling apologies and sleepless nights. When he sits at dinner tables with his family, he praised warriors and cursed island devils, but deep down, he knew with absolute clarity that his own hands shaped the horrors that he blamed others for, that those people that he killed weren't devils at all. They were just like him, just like the Marlians, and just like everyone else. He lies to everyone back home because the truth would destroy them. He lies because the truth already destroyed him. Reiner's PTSD is suffocating. Flashbacks strike like ambushes. Marco's face twisted in confusion. Children screaming beneath falling stones. The looks of betrayal in eyes he once fought beside. Night after night, he drowns in memories that do not fade. Day after day, he walks through life like a ghost in his own skin. Self-destruction becomes his closest friend. The battlefield is the only place where he can breathe, because dying in combat would only make sense. Dying there would justify the suffering. He charges headfirst into violence not out of bravery, but out of yearning, the desire for a punishment grand enough to silence the guilt. When he says, "Somebody please just kill me," it isn't melodrama. It is a confession, a plea for release, a heart begging to stop its own beating because living has become the crueler sentence. And yet, life continues. The most painful betrayal Reiner ever committed was not destroying the walls, it was betraying the friendships he let himself believe were real. Eren, Mikasa, Armin, the people who saw him as a comrade. The people who might have saved him if he had let them. The guilt of loving the same people he was tasked to murder is the sharpest blade pressed against his throat. If love once made him feel human, guilt made sure he never forget he was a monster. But something subtle changes when new warrior candidates enter his life. Falco, Gabby, children shaped by the same lie that once molded him. They look up to him with the same naive admiration that he once gave others. Through them, Reiner witnesses the cycle he helped perpetuate, one of indoctrination, sacrifice, and the promise that suffering is noble if it serves a cause. Their innocence forces him to confront a question he has spent years avoiding. If he hates what he became, how can he allow them to follow suit? Reiner's journey towards self-forgiveness is not linear. It isn't triumphant or clean. There is no moment where he suddenly believes he deserves redemption. Instead, forgiveness reveals itself slowly, not as relief from guilt, but as the strength to carry it without letting it consume him. He continues to fight not because he believes in a future where he is forgiven, but because he refuses to let children become versions of himself. And there is humanity in that choice, in trying to stop suffering from spreading even when he cannot undo the pain he caused. Reiner was a victim of war long before he was a villain in one. He was raised to believe that worth is measured in violence, that loyalty requires dehumanization, and that survival is something earned through cruelty. The tragedy of his story was that he internalized those lessons too well. Guilt has a way of rewriting a person's understanding of self. Reiner once defined himself by the roles forced onto him: warrior, demon, savior, monster. But as everything collapses around him, he begins to define himself by something far more fragile: the desire to protect, even if protection comes too late for most. His strength is not the armor that shields his body. His strength is the willingness to remain alive even when living hurts. That is what forgiveness looks like for someone who cannot forget. It's not a clean erasure of sin. It's not absolution granted by others. It's a quiet acceptance that pain can be carried without becoming an identity. Reiner Braun is a man made of guilt, but he continues to rise not because he believes he deserves to, but because he hopes that one day someone else won't have to. His story is proof that surviving is sometimes the bravest thing a person can do, because survival allows the possibility of change. And change, no matter how small, is where self-forgiveness begins. Some stories begin with triumph, with a character who already embodies strength, heroism, and confidence. But Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood begins his story with loss. Ed lives every day with the quiet knowledge that the most defining moment of his life will always be the one that he regrets the most. Even when the world praises him for his strength, his brilliance, and his unwavering will, he knows none of those things were born from courage. They were born from fear. The fear of what he caused, and the fear that he may never be able to make it right. His story is not the arc of a hero rising into greatness. It's the journey of a boy who believes he forfeited any right to innocence. Where other characters struggle to stand against enemies, Edward's real enemy is his own guilt, and oftentimes it's personified and standing right next to him, trapped in a suit of armor, faceless and expressionless. A constant reminder that love can take monstrous shapes when pushed into desperation. Every clang of Alphonse's metal footsteps is a memory that was supposed to be buried. Every hollow echo of his movements reminds Ed of the body that should have been there instead. From the moment that he wakes to the moment that he sleeps, guilt shapes how Edward walks through the world. He doesn't allow himself breaks. He doesn't allow himself hesitation. That isn't perseverance born from hope, but punishment born from responsibility. To slow down would mean feeling the weight again, and he can't afford to feel it. His missing limbs might be replaced by steel, but they still ache with meaning. His automail is the living document of a mistake that he believes shouldn't be forgiven. Many people chase goals to build a future. Edward chases a goal to escape his past. The goal of getting their bodies back, of getting Alphonse out of this metal shell, of getting his own arm and his leg back. Every step forward is fueled by the belief that running fast enough might one day rewrite history. But guilt doesn't work like alchemy. There is no equivalent trade for inner peace. Edward is brilliant, but that brilliance betrays him. He knows exactly what he did. He knows exactly why it was wrong, and he understands exactly how much pain that it caused. And what makes Edward's guilt especially brutal is that all this didn't come from selfishness. It came from love. He wanted to bring his mother back, not for power or for pride, but because he couldn't accept a world without her. And when love causes the wound cuts deeper. Mistakes that come from malice can be rejected. Mistakes that come from devotion silently rot in the heart. But Edward's pain isn't shaped only by the loss of his brother's body. It deepens each time he sees the consequences of humans reaching too far. Nina Tucker becomes the echo of his own childhood, a reminder that the line between tragic innocence and monstrous harm is often crossed by those who think they're doing the right thing. He wasn't the one who performed the transmutation that destroyed her life, but her suffering attaches itself to him like another scar. He blames himself for not being able to save her, just like he's not able to save his brother. And he recognizes the look in her eyes, the look of desperation pretending to be hope. And we see that this guilt still haunts him because years later, in the final arc, with the world hanging in the balance, when he confronts truth for the final time, he tells truth not about nations or homunculi, but of the memory of a girl who didn't deserve what happened to her. He calls himself a puny human, someone who couldn't even save a child who was turned into a chimera. This shows that guilt never faded. It shaped him. Ed's journey is often described as a quest to restore his body and Alphonse's, but the real restoration he seeks runs deeper. It's simply the task of forgiving himself. Self-forgiveness, real forgiveness, is not something earned through action. That is what Ed learns slowly and painfully throughout the series. Forgiveness isn't the reward for success. It's the result of acceptance. His breaking point isn't a failure, it's clarity. When he realizes that no amount of power could ever undo what happened, that no amount of knowledge could bring back what was lost, that love can try its hardest and still lose. He understands for the first time that he has been asking the question wrong. It isn't, how do I fix the past, but how do I live despite it? And when he reaches the moment where everything hangs in the balance, he doesn't cling to the variability that once made him believe he can control fate. He lets it go. Not as surrender, but as acceptance. Alchemy once felt like the key to redemption, like the thing that would help Alphonse get his body back, or himself get his arm and his leg back. But he realized that giving it up would be the doorway to forgiveness. He chooses his brother's life over the very defining feature of his existence, and in doing so, he removes the last remaining weight of his guilt, the idea that his value comes from what he can fix. He builds a future where love does not demand impossible bargains, where identity is not carved from regret, where being human is enough. And that decision doesn't erase guilt entirely. It never will. After all, he doesn't get his leg back in the end, and some nights, memory will still knock on the door of his mind, asking him to relive what can't be changed. But in choosing acceptance, he gains something that he has never allowed himself before, the permission to move forward without needing to run. Edward began his journey believing that if he tried hard enough, he could rewrite the laws of the world, and in the end, he learns that the only thing that he needed to rewrite was his belief about himself. And it's that acceptance, not alchemy, not genius, not rebellion against fate, that ultimately saves him. Because the greatest miracle isn't in raising the dead, it's allowing yourself to finally breathe again. The journey towards self-forgiveness is often long and traumatic. Your guilt can eat away at you until there's nothing left. For Shoya Ishida from A Silent Voice, his journey towards self-forgiveness was just as cruel. Now, I know, I've talked about Shoya before on this channel, and if you haven't seen that video, then check it out after you're done watching this one. But I felt that Shoya perfectly identified the journey to self-forgiveness, and that he had to be included in this video. Shoya's story begins long after the damage is done, long after the words were thrown like stones, long after the laughter cut sharper than knives, long after he realized that cruelty is a stain that does not wash out simply because someone wishes it would. His journey doesn't start with innocence lost, it starts with innocence weaponized. As a child, he pushed a girl who only wanted connection into a world of fear and confusion. Shoko Nishimiya did nothing wrong except exist in a way that was different. She couldn't hear the laughter, but she could feel it. She couldn't hear the insults, but she could see the lips that formed them. Shoya led that cruelty with the reckless confidence of someone who hadn't yet learned what trauma looks like on someone else's face. He made her silence the target. He made her difference the spotlight. He pushed her until she cried, and then mocked the tears that he caused. But children eventually grow, and sometimes they grow into the weight of what they've done. And when the consequences of what he had done finally arrived, they did not arrive softly. They crushed him. They left him standing alone. The classmates who once encouraged his jokes abandoned him when those jokes turned back on them. The laughter that he enjoyed became the sound that haunted him. Shoya learned what it felt like to be the one everyone stared at with disgust. He learned what it meant to be the problem that no one wanted near them. He learned that isolation is not just being alone, it is believing that the world is better without you in it. And that belief settled into his bones. From that point on, Shoya didn't need anyone else to punish him, 'cause he would do it himself. Every day and every moment, with a consistency that no bully could ever match. He convinced himself that the only proper penance was solitude, that he should walk through life without friends, without joy, without possibilities. He lowered his eyes and kept them low, not out of shyness, but out of shame. He trained himself to never meet another person's gaze, as though he no longer deserved to be seen, and as he sunk further into his regret, his mind found a way to visualize that belief, with crossed out faces. Everyone he passed was marked with an X. Their identities were erased, their humanity blurred beyond recognition, not because they weren't people, but because he refused to let himself see them as people. To see someone clearly would mean admitting he wanted connection, and wanting connection would mean wanting forgiveness. Forgiveness, as he believed, was meant for better people. So, the X's stayed. Day after day, year after year, face after face. His world turned into a crowd of ghosts, and he was the only one who could see the masks that he forced onto them. It was a private language of guilt. You don't deserve to know them. You don't deserve to see them. You don't even deserve to exist among them. Guilt didn't just follow him, it redesigned his entire world. Eventually, the weight pushed him to the edge. When he stood on that bridge, contemplating a final escape, it wasn't a dramatic moment. It was the quiet culmination of years spent believing he was irredeemable. He looked at the water below and saw peace, not because he wanted to die, but because he couldn't imagine deserving to live. But guilt, for all its cruelty, sometimes breaks open a path towards healing. Because before he stepped away from the world, he realized there was something left undone, something he needed to face, even if that confrontation destroyed him. He needed to see Shoko again, not to feel better and not to be forgiven, but simply to say, "I'm sorry." That apology was the first act of kindness he'd allow himself. His efforts were awkward, his movements were stiff, but sincerity rarely arrives polished. And in his clumsy attempts to bridge the silence that he once tormented, Shoya planted the first seed of change. Forgiveness didn't come instantly. It didn't come cleanly. Their relationship grew in stumbles, in misunderstandings, in fear, in wounds reopening without warning. Healing is not a linear process, and neither of them were whole enough to make it look easy. But that's when something began to shift. Because Shoko's face was the first person he'd allowed himself to fully see, the first person without an X. She wasn't a victim of his past, but someone who deserved a place in his present. And then more faces followed. The X's around everyone's faces slowly began to fall away. Not because the world was changing, but because Shoya was. Every time a face returned, it represented a truth he was slowly accepting. Human connection is not a reward for perfection, it is a condition of being alive. Yet progress always invites fear. The closer he felt to others, the more terrified he became that he would break them again. When guilt is carved deep enough, joy feels dangerous. Happiness feels undeserved. There were moments when he snapped back. Moments he believed nothing had changed at all. Trauma doesn't disappear simply because someone tries to get better. It lingers. It questions. It challenges every moment of hope with the memory of who he once was. His guilt was still gnawing in the back of his mind. But Shoya kept moving forward, one unsteady step at a time. Until one day, something extraordinary happened. He lifted his head. For the first time in years, he looked at the world instead of running from it. And as his eyes met the crowd around him, the X's that had dominated his vision finally fell away. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't triumph, it was acceptance. Acceptance that he had done harm, and that he had done healing. Acceptance that he could not change the past, but he could choose what to do with his lessons. Acceptance that self-respect is not a prize given by others, but a decision made in the private moments of courage. When the X's on everyone's faces dropped, the world didn't become new. Shoya did. That moment captures a truth much larger than one boy in one story. Guilt isolates, but self-forgiveness reconnects. Shoya discovered that the ability to greet another person's face, to see them clearly and allow them to see him, is not a small thing. It is a declaration, a quiet, steady refusal to let shame become destiny. The weight he carried will never fully disappear. He will always remember the harm that he caused. He will always carry the responsibility of learning from it. But he no longer lives as a prisoner to who he used to be. He understands now that the point of facing your mistakes isn't to erase them. It's to ensure that they shape you into someone who never repeats them. In the end, his journey is not defined by bullying, or by loneliness, or by the darkness that he nearly embraced. It is defined by what came next. The willingness to try again, the strength to ask for help, and the courage to believe that change is possible. And that transformation is what self-forgiveness truly looks like.